In a world that constantly screams at us that more is always better, that accumulating is synonymous with success, there is a rare, almost forgotten courage that defies the logic of this deafening modernity, the courage of detachment. Living with enough is not accepting mediocrity, but embracing the silent freedom that arises when we move away from the weight that suffocates us, the excess that corrodes us, and that which binds us to the frenetic pace of consumption. It is learning to differentiate between what truly nourishes us and what imprisons us under the false glow of superfluity. Society insists on selling us the illusion that happiness is measured by the volume of possessions, by ostentatious status, or by the sound of a credit card being approved. But this is an empty promise that leaves a trail of anxiety, frustration, and loneliness. There is a silent beauty in emptiness, a fertile space where life can finally breathe, where the soul finds the breath to perceive, reflect, and reinvent itself. It is in this space that we discover that the essential thing is not in what we accumulate, but in the way we experience the present, in the intensity with which we connect with ourselves and the world around us. Emptiness is not absence, but possibility. It is not abandonment, but an invitation to creation. It is not fear, but a challenge. It forces us to confront the truth we often avoid, that most of the burdens we carry are our own choices, imposed by external standards, by the expectations of others, and by the fear of falling short of what society considers successful. Every object we set aside, every need we refuse to satisfy, every desire we learn to observe and not satisfy immediately, is a step toward ourselves, the construction of an internal territory where no one else has access except those who dare to confront their own essence. It is in this territory that genuine freedom is born, the kind that does not depend on external conditions, social approval, or bank accounts. It is there that we feel the taste of autonomy, that we realize that life in its purest form does not require excess, but attention, presence, and courage. Living with enough is also an act of resistance, resistance against the machinery that turns us into tireless consumers, that teaches us to replace what we have with constant novelty, that pushes us toward the illusion that fulfillment is always outside of us, in something that needs to be bought, conquered, or displayed. By saying no to excess, we learn to say yes to ourselves, to our thoughts, feelings, and conscious choices. Each conscious renunciation is an act of power, a silent declaration that our life will not be determined by what is imposed on us, but by what we choose to cultivate with intention. And it is in this balance between renunciation and presence that we perceive the depth of being. We don't need more to be complete. We need clarity, awareness, and the courage to face the fear of emptiness. The once feared void becomes a fertile field of possibilities, a space where we can rebuild our priorities, reevaluate our desires, and rediscover the essence of what truly makes us live. Detachment, then, is not loss but gain, not diminishment but expansion, not scarcity but freedom. Detachment requires courage because it forces us to look at what has always been familiar and ask honestly and fearlessly, does this serve me or consume me? Does this liberate me or imprison me? This question, simple in form, is profound in its effect. It confronts us with the truth we often avoid, that much of what we carry does not truly belong to us, but imprisons us. We live in a society that glorifies possession, that transforms excess into a symbol of status and prestige, that makes us believe that accumulation is synonymous with success and fulfillment. Every object we keep, every debt we incur, every commitment imposed by other people's standards robs us of the most precious of riches, time. Time, which cannot be bought or sold, which cannot be recovered, which is the raw material of our existence. Detachment is an act of resistance. It forces us to challenge the insatiable logic of consumption and realize that real value lies not in what we possess, but in how we use it. Each conscious choice to let go of the superfluous is a step toward freedom, clarity, and sovereignty over our own destiny. It is in this process that we discover that true luxury is not found in shop windows, nor measured in numbers, nor flaunted on social media. It is experienced in the freedom to decide, in the autonomy to choose, in the ability to shape each moment according to our own will. When we free ourselves from the tyranny of the superfluous, we take control of our lives, ceasing to be puppets of external expectations and becoming conscious authors. Testimonies of one's own story. Each act of detachment is both a challenge and a reward. It's a challenge because it forces us to confront old habits, ingrained beliefs, and silent fears. It's a reward because by letting go of what holds us back, we create space for what truly matters: meaningful experiences, genuine relationships, time to reflect, create, and feel. Freeing ourselves from the possessions that superficially define us is also freeing ourselves from anxiety, stress, and the constant need for validation. It's recognizing that less can paradoxically mean more. More freedom, more presence, more authenticity. The courage of detachment manifests itself in small daily gestures, but its impact is profound. Every item we stop accumulating, every unnecessary commitment we reject, every habit we intentionally transform contributes to building a lighter, more conscious, and more whole life. It is in this space of choice that we learn to value essence over appearance, depth over superficiality, truth over illusion. It is in this space that the phrase, "I am enough," ceases to be merely an ideal and becomes a daily practice, a mantra of freedom, a living awareness that life belongs to us and that we can live it fully without external chains. Detachment teaches us that true wealth lies not in material possessions, but in sovereignty over our own time, in the autonomy to decide our actions, and in the courage to say no to that which steals our energy, attention, and freedom. Each conscious act of renunciation is a silent yet powerful victory over the logic of excess, over social pressure, and over the anxiety imposed by the modern world. It is in the deliberate choice to live with intention, to prioritize the essential, and to let go of the superfluous, that we discover the deepest dimension of life, an existence guided by freedom, awareness, and fulfillment, a life in which every moment is truly ours. In the end, detachment is not loss but achievement. It is not emptiness but fulfillment. It is not abandonment but freedom. When we look at life and firmly declare, "I am enough," we understand that each step on this path brings us closer to what truly matters: self-mastery, clarity of purpose, and the genuine experience of true luxury, the freedom to live fully with meaning, autonomy, and integrity. But this freedom does not come without effort. Living with less requires discipline, learning, and above all, the courage to face the silent laziness that comfort imposes on us. Society educates us for passivity, for automatic repetition, for the substitution of effort for convenience. We grow up believing that every difficulty should be avoided, that every need can be met by others, that every desire deserves immediate gratification. Breaking this logic requires a rare, almost heroic determination. Every learned skill, every intentional gesture, every moment in which we replace the automatic with the conscious builds, brick by brick, the bridge that takes us from silent servitude to full sovereignty over our own existence. Repairing instead of discarding, creating instead of buying, cultivating instead of depending. These small choices, seemingly simple at first glance, become acts of rebellion against a world that pushes us toward dependence, unconscious consumption, and numb mediocrity. Each intentional action is a silent manifesto against the logic of scarcity imposed by society, against the illusion that we always need more to be complete. It is in this daily effort that we begin to perceive the value of what is lasting, the weight of what truly matters, the depth of what genuinely enriches life. Learning to live with the essential is, above all, a training of the soul. It is a refinement of the spirit that teaches us to perceive the difference between the fleeting and the permanent, between the ephemeral and the eternal, between the superficial and the profound. It is an invitation to patience, to attention, to the conscious appreciation of each moment. Each deliberate choice, each intentional sacrifice is a step toward a fuller, more authentic life, more aligned with who we truly are. True pleasure, we discover, is not born from accumulation or immediate gratification, but from achieved autonomy, from mastery over one's own time, from the ability to choose how and with whom to spend each moment of one's existence. It is painful because it requires a sincere look within ourselves, a confrontation with our weaknesses, fears, and insecurities. It is necessary to deal with uncertainty, to accept that giving up the superfluous can create a space that was previously filled with distractions and illusory comfort. But it is also glorious. Every victory over the urge to accumulate, over the temptation to follow imposed standards, is an act of courage that brings us closer to fulfillment, inner peace, and a life lived with intention and purpose. It is through this conscious effort that we become masters of our destiny, that we cease to be puppets of external expectations and begin to experience true freedom. The discipline of living with less also teaches us to appreciate every detail that previously went unnoticed. The aroma of a home-cooked meal, the feel of the earth beneath our hands as we cultivate something, the simple joy of creating something useful with our own efforts, all of this transforms into immeasurable wealth because it does not depend on transactions, consumption, or external approval. Every act of autonomy, no matter how small, is a victory over passivity, mediocrity, and the emptiness that society tries to fill with things. And in the end, we realize that living with enough is not a loss but a gain. It is not a diminishment, but an expansion. It is not a meaningless sacrifice, but the achievement of what truly matters: freedom, clarity, awareness, and sovereignty over one's life. Every conscious effort, every lesson learned, every discipline practiced is a step toward a richer existence, not in possessions, but in meaning. It is in this daily practice, in this continuous exercise of attention and intention, that we find true luxury, mastery over our own time, unbreakable autonomy, and the ability to live fully, without chains, without debt, without distractions that rob us of our essence. The discipline of detachment is paradoxically the path to true abundance. By letting go of excess, we discover the richness of what remains: clarity of thought, serenity of heart, depth of relationships, intensity of experience. There is no greater luxury than autonomy over one's own time, one's own body, one's own spirit. The ultimate luxury is being able to choose when to work, when to rest, when to create, when to love, without being at the mercy of debts, external obligations, or expectations imposed by others. Living this way is discovering that the world offers us abundance not in what we possess, but in what we are capable of fully experiencing, without the constant distraction of replacing emptiness with consumption. The path of detachment and discipline is therefore a path of courage and wisdom. It is facing the fear of emptiness that society has taught us to fear, and realizing that therein lies the fertile ground for the new, the space where real life happens. Every conscious choice is an act of resistance against the tyranny of the superfluous. Every intentional renunciation is a step toward freedom. Every moment of silence is a victory over the dictatorship of haste and anxiety. Living with enough is not giving up life, but claiming it for oneself. It is building a territory of personal sovereignty where no one else can intervene. It is transforming everyday life into a ritual of attention, where every gesture, every decision, every sacrifice is charged with meaning. And so, in the encounter between detachment, discipline, and the awareness of true luxury, a life emerges that shines not for what it possesses, but for what it is capable of being: full, intense, conscious, and free. True wealth is invisible to eyes that measure by numbers, but perceptible to those who see deeply. The wealth of one's own time, of autonomy, of the ability to create, learn, feel, and choose. The luxury of living without debt, without constraints, without subordination to systems that sell false needs and collect our lives in exchange for disposable commodities. The luxury of being able to decide on one's own time, of breathing without chains, of existing with clarity and purpose. A life lived this way demands sacrifice, requires courage, demands constant learning. It is not an easy path, nor a superficial choice. It is a journey that confronts us with our limits, our insecurities, our conveniences, and our dependencies. Each decision to simplify, to prioritize the essential, to let go of the superfluous, brings us face to face with the truth of who we are and what we truly value. On this path, discipline is not just a method, but an ally, a tool that transforms every difficulty into a learning experience, every challenge into an opportunity for growth. It is the constant reminder that living fully requires conscious effort, attention, and the courage to face one's own routine, one's own habits, and one's own fears. But each step is worth it, because each step brings us closer to what truly matters: freedom, integrity, awareness, and serenity. It is not a freedom imposed by the world, sold in packages or displayed as a status symbol. It is the silent freedom that arises from sovereignty over our choices, from mastery over our own time, from the ability to decide, without interference, the course of our lives. Integrity arises naturally in this process, because by consciously choosing between the necessary and the dispensable, we enter and the essential and the fleeting. We reaffirm our own truth, becoming true to ourselves and to what we believe to be meaningful. Consciousness deepens as we begin to observe not only the world around us, but ourselves, our intentions, our desires, and our actions. And serenity, in turn, springs from the realization that life can be full without excess, that calm is not the absence of movement, but conscious presence in every moment, in every choice, in every act of attention. It is a life that is not measured by what one has, but by what one can feel, by what one can choose, by what one can give and share. Every gesture becomes more meaningful when it is not overshadowed by excess. Every moment is lived intensely because it is not diluted by useless distractions. Pleasure is not found in the ephemeral, in constant novelty, or in ostentation, but in the depth of experience, in genuine connection with ourselves and others. Choosing to donate, to share knowledge, time, care, and attention becomes a conscious practice of wealth that cannot be bought, but cultivated. It is in this capacity to feel and share that we find the true value of existence, and it is in this very act that we become more human, more whole, more alive. It is the life that challenges superficiality, that confronts the mediocrity of empty comfort, that chooses the intensity of being over the distraction of having. By choosing to experience reality in its essence, we give up illusions, distractions that mask incompleteness, and promises of happiness that are never fulfilled. Each conscious sacrifice, each transformed habit, each deliberate renunciation becomes a step toward authenticity, clarity, and emotional and spiritual depth. The courage to live this way is not just an individual act. It is a silent declaration against a society that tries to measure success by the volume of possessions and superficialities. It is life that restores us to ourselves. It is life that teaches us that the ultimate luxury is not found in accumulation, but in freedom, in our own time, in awakened consciousness, in the ability to choose and decide, to create meaning, to feel, and to love. It is a life that defies imposed standards, that values what is lasting, that honors authenticity, and that above all reconnects us with the essence of being human, vulnerable, conscious, and free. And in the end, we realize that true luxury lies not in what we acquire, but in what we give up. It is not empty sacrifice nor forced renunciation, but in conscious choices that free us from the weight of possessions and the illusion that more is always better. Society has taught us to measure wealth by the volume of goods, the shine in shop windows, the number of titles we hold, or the appearance we can display. But this is a misleading, superficial measure that masks true scarcity, the absence of freedom, of our own time, and awakened consciousness. Giving up the superfluous, therefore, is in itself an act of courage, a gesture of rebellion against external expectations, against the insatiable logic of a world that wants to keep us prisoners of its invisible rules, its silent anxiety, its constant haste. True wealth is not measured in possessions, but in freedom. It is the freedom to decide how to spend each moment, how to invest each gesture, how to choose who and what we surround ourselves with. It is the autonomy of not depending on the approval of others, of not being manipulated by social standards or the incessant drive to consume. It is understanding that life is finite and precious, and that every minute wasted in the pursuit of useless objects, in the search for external validation, or in empty pursuits is a minute that will never return. When we learn to value this freedom, we realize that true luxury cannot be bought with money, acquired with possessions, or flaunted on social media. It is achieved with attention, courage, and discipline. True happiness cannot be bought, but rather achieved through the courage to let go, the discipline to learn, and the wisdom to live with enough. Each act of conscious renunciation is a silent yet powerful victory over the world that insists on keeping us distracted, dependent, and dissatisfied. Each choice of simplicity is a declaration. My life is mine, and no one else will control it. It is not an affirmation of isolation, but of autonomy, of sovereignty over our own desires, our priorities, and the way we construct our existence. It is the realization that, by letting go of excess, we create space for the essential, for depth, for truly meaningful experiences. Each moment lived with intention is a declaration of independence. It is an act of consciousness that transforms routine into ritual, that transforms ordinary gestures into manifestations of freedom. When we choose to live with mindfulness, when we cultivate the essential rather than the superficial, when we cultivate the sufficient instead of pursuing the infinite, we reveal the richest dimension of existence, the capacity to be, to feel, to create, and to love authentically. Freedom is the true luxury, and living fully is the greatest wealth we can achieve. The life that emerges from these choices is intense, profound, and conscious. It is a life that challenges the logic of consumption, the dictatorship of excess, and the tyranny of external expectations. It is a life that returns us to ourselves, that reconnects us with our essence, with our most genuine desires, with our capacity to create meaning. Every conscious sacrifice, every acquired discipline, every moment lived mindfully is a stepping stone in the construction of a territory of unbreakable autonomy, where no one else can interfere, where no one else can dictate rules, where no one else can steal our freedom. And thus we realize that true luxury is not bought, collected, or flaunted. It is earned. It is practiced. It is lived. And it is in this conscious living, in this continuous exercise of attention, courage, and discipline, that we discover the greatest wealth of all, life itself, lived with meaning, fullness, and freedom. It is proof that giving up excess doesn't impoverish us, but makes us truly rich because it restores us to ourselves and the power to decide our own existence.